realistically, I think everyone can admit that Shadowlands was way too overcomplicated, which made so many people lose interest in the lore. I mean, we literally were fighting some death god and then went into the back door of the creation of the universe where the other gods were created like robots. However, looks like Blizzard may finally be trying to fix this giant can of worms they can open. Not only did they admit Shadowlands sucked a few months back, but a new document sheds light on the actual cosmology chart, which on one hand mentions that Shadowlands might not be the only purest afterlife, but on the other it kinda makes fun of the complexity of Shadowlands, which might be an attempt to scale down the lore and bring it back to Legion. So what is this new document, and are they softly retconning some of the crazy parts of Shadowlands? If you guys want to buy Total War, Elder Scrolls, or any other game, you can get them at great prices with my Gamivo link. You can also get anything Warcraft related, gift cards and software, and all below market prices. Best of all, if you add my code DORON, you can get an even bigger discount, so make sure to check out my link in the description and get some amazing deals with Gamivo. If you've been following the little bit more obscure news, you might have seen that a few months back Blizzard has sort of informally apologized for the entire Shadowlands debacle. Of course, they didn't outright come and retcon the jailer and say that Shadowlands sucked, but we got some screenshots from a game developer conference where they talked about the mistakes with the previous expansion, what they learned, what they wanted to change, and just how many subs they actually lost during Shadowlands. Spoiler alert, it was a lot. One of the big things was the storytelling of making it way too complicated and hard to follow, and instead they want a big type of cosmological storytelling in the background, but with us being the adventurers on Azeroth. Well, it looks like this is actually now happening in-game, but in the most subtle way possible, and they're doing a sort of a slow retcon, as we can see with the new book that was discovered from the Errata humans. So, I know, talking about Shadowlands and really bad lore is honestly beating a dead horse at this point. I mean, we are getting into the World Soul Saga, but I do think it is totally realistic to say that Shadowlands did some irreparable damage to the entire universe, and quite a lot of damage, and since then we have seen a drastic reduction in the lore community. Some of the old forums are dead or a lot less active, and there's just so much less activity happening on the lore side of things for World of Warcraft, as so many people were burned on this lore that they just stopped following it completely. Now they're sort of trying to undo some of the damage. They have fired the main guy that was behind all the writing, but the reality is that Shadowlands opened a huge can of worms that you can't really even close at this point, outside of just saying Shadowlands was a bad dream and it never really happened. It essentially made everything ambiguous and sort of meaningless in the grand scheme of things. The first and the most evident issue is the entire afterlife itself, where it looks like we are just forcefully bound to this cycle, and all these dead beings just go and they serve in another afterlife where they can actually die forever if they mess up, and it just makes all the heroic deaths and deaths from the Warcraft's past completely meaningless. Then they can ruin some of the characters like Arthas or Sylvanas or Keltas, and worst of all, they introduced this incredibly confusing jargon of cosmology, just opening countless possibilities of what could happen. The biggest issue by far is the fact that they had retconned the Chronicle in a way which was supposed to be like the Bible of the entire lore, where you would learn what is really going on, and in turn they just made it a perspective, and then they introduced a million other perspectives. This is one of the main reasons why it is almost impossible to now say anything for certain in the lore and to know the lore, and even the reason why so many of my theories sound crazy, even though they are possible, because at this point nothing can really be said in the lore for certain. For example, previously I made a theory that we will see a Void Deathwing. This is an entirely realistic scenario because they said different cosmological powers have their own versions of afterlives, so Deathwing, as ultimately a void being corrupted by the end, should be in the Void Afterlife, and then they were told that old gods like void beings don't really die, so by all accounts he should still be around. If Tyrion was a light follower and was infused by the light, he might be in the light afterlife, hence we didn't see him in the Shadowlands. Then they introduced an Atreus and the entire Natrizine things, which makes it seem like this guy could return and take over the Scourge, for example, so they're technically his creation. So the point is, by opening up the lore like this and making everything ambiguous, they didn't really originally think things through and how this could ruin everything, and realize that they're now setting up the lore for about a million different plot holes and how it is going to progress in the future. Well, look looks like now in the War Within they may be trying to figure out a solution or the start of a solution, no matter how simple it sounds. So if you remember Shadowlands lore, you might remember that the biggest retcon and the drastic lore change was the introduction of the first ones and the new cosmological chart. They went crazy on this. This is what got most people to stop following the lore. They added this 7th creator power that apparently is above all others, and made it seem like all the big villains like Sargeras or the Void Lords or the Titans are just little children playing around. We even went to Zereth Mortis, which was like the behind the scenes where these guys were created, which made it seem like all these gods are just simple robots and servants of the first ones. Then the cosmology went crazy and it made it so ambiguous that it's literally impossible to seriously follow. Now we got a document from the Arathi talking about the cosmology, adding yet another perspective to the chart. Remember, right now we have the Chronicle one, which is a Titan perspective, we got the Broker one, which is apparently a less biased perspective, and this guy that really just seems to be making fun of all of this. He says that unlike the old Erator, because these guys are actually the Arathi Empire, they don't think the cosmology chart is as simple as it is, and there are no singular energy types. He says the cosmos appears as a hexateron. Imagine a 4-sided tetrahedron eternally extruded to form a multi-dimensional solid with 20 planes of existence, 15 transitory pathways, and 6 vertices, where interferon patterns create monopolar expression of cosmic forces. If you're trying to figure out what this means, it's almost certainly just trying to essentially be a very subtle way of Blizzard admitting they kind of went crazy with the complexity and the cosmology, and it's a joke that it gets even more complex. However, interesting enough, they do actually reveal some interesting things in this document, which could be foreshadowing for the future. They say that singular magics are unstable and they use more elements, so Firelands, for example, uses magma and flame. This kind of lines up with actual cosmology chart. It might explain some of the old lore on how the Burning Legion, for example, uses the Void and the Feral, or the Titans might possibly utilize the Light and Arcane, or how life can be resurrected by light. It also makes it seem like pure beings of a single cosmology don't really exist, and that, for example, pure order or pure death aren't really a thing. And by this point, I mean, Shadowlands itself might not be the purest expression of the realm of death, but a mix between life and death or some other force. Of course, super confusing, and it does give more context, but honestly, to me, it makes it seem like they may be admitting that it is too complex. They may be trying to paint the Shadowlands as a bit of a crazy time, as they're so obviously toning down on everything. We got Dragonflight that was entirely a reset period and set on Azeroth, and now this entire World Soul Saga, including the next 3 expansions, are entirely on Azeroth as well. Now, I don't think they are retconning the Shadowlands lore, like all of it. The big things happen in the cosmology are almost certain by this point. We have some foreshadowing in the new expansion. We know the Titans had lied, we know they're coming, we know the Void is going to invade, we know there is in fact the biggest conspiracy ever that will be revealed in the last Titan. So the entire universe coming together and all is still continuing, but I think we might be done with the Zereths and the shapes and the numbers and the fractals that they really pushed hard back in Shadowlands. They really had some crazy documents, if you remember back from this expansion. Like, some were really try-hard documents trying to sound incredibly complex, like a 5D chess thing, like I'm 14 and this is deep type content. So this new Arathi document, being 3 times more absurd than Shadowlands, is potentially trying to tone it down in a joking manner from the looks of it. However, these Arathi do in fact wield the Sacred Flame. We recently learned that their emperor is actually called Thoradin the 2nd or the 3rd. It is uncertain what the number is, as we have deciphered a translated document, and we are going to certainly see Thoradin soon in his Light Empire, and they do seem like they actually know some things about the universe, as they appear very technologically advanced. So all in all, they're not outright retconning Shadowlands, but it does seem like they might not continue to follow all the concepts they had laid out during this expansion. Thanks for watching. Check out my video how we fell for the greatest con in all WoW history by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on the cult of Mithras and Roman mythology by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.